Last year, rookies like Ladd McConkey, Bucky Irving, Jalen McMillan, Bo Nix were kind of being overlooked heading into the NFL draft, yet not only did they end up being productive in real life, but they were also productive for fantasy. So let's look at some guys going into this year's NFL drafts that I think are being a little overlooked right now that could be productive for your fantasy teams in 2025. Let's start at wide receiver. This isn't thought to be a good wide receiver class, but I do think there are some sneaky wide receivers with potential, starting with Trey Harris of Ole Miss. This is a big-bodied wide receiver, and what I really like about him, he's not like a big-body guy who just has to be on the outside. He can also play in the slot, which is an advantage for these types of wide receivers. He's an excellent route runner, and he's got great hands at the catch point. So, two things that we see a lot from elite wide receivers: good route running, good hands. Those are things you need. Now, he's not the most explosive guy here. He's not a guy that, pops off with his athletic testing or his explosiveness or anything. But even still, giving what, is kind of the limitations in athleticism, he's still a guy who's able to pick up yards after the catch, which is really nice. And he's also a very good threat in the red zone. A threat to score touchdowns, being that big-bodied wide receiver, which is always a major plus for fantasy. I've seen other kind of experts comp him to Michael Thomas. Yes, Michael Thomas from the Saints. And I see a lot of the similarities, big-bodied wide receiver. Doesn't have a diverse route tree, like he can't run the full route tree, but the routes he can run, he's very good at them. If he can get in a system that utilizes him similar to how the Saints utilize Michael Thomas, that definitely is his ceiling here. But again, for a guy going pretty much overlooked in, everywhere right now heading into the draft, he's got the kind of ceiling we're looking for. I'm excited to see where he lands in this year's NFL draft. Now, kind of on the opposite side, we have Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State. This is a prototypical outside wide receiver, but he actually does have the athletic, talents here. Ran a 4.47 40, had a 40-inch vertical jump over a 10-inch broad jump. He's got the athleticism. He also has great hands. He's great in those contested catch situations, which is something your, NFL teams and, fantasy players like us should be looking for in those prototypical X wide receivers, because sometimes you got to make those contested catches on the outside, kind of like a George Pickens type of guy here. Honestly, the guy I really kind of think he reminds me of a lot is Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson was one of these guys, a bigger wide receiver, was not an elite separator, right? Wasn't one of those guys that's just always open, but you get the ball near him in his prime, he would often come down with it. He had some very productive years, some, high-end wide receiver 1 years during his prime stretch there. I think that can be Jaden Higgins. Again, talking ceiling here, not talking like floor or anything, but we're looking at overlooked guys going into the draft. I think he's a type of guy NFL teams are going to like, that big-bodied X wide receiver who can make those contested catches. So if he lands in a good spot, don't sleep on him in 2025. And then I got to bring up my boy Cam Skattebo again, out of Arizona State, running back out of Arizona State. Obviously, his stock fell in the draft combine because, well, it turned out he had a low-grade hamstring strain, and he didn't really do much. He did vertical and broad jump. Did have a nice vertical there, but look, this isn't a guy that's going to pop off athletically. You're not going to watch Cam Skattebo and be like, wow, I'm blown away by this guy's speed or athleticism. But what you are going to be blown away by is how he plays the game of football. He's a tough runner. He's always going forward. He keeps those legs churning. Rarely goes down on first contact. Also, a fantastic pass catcher, which is very rare for a running back his size to be as good as he is in the passing game as well. Also, an above average pass blocker, which is a plus because that means he's not a liability to teams on third down. Look, he's got his pro day coming up. Maybe he'll test well at his pro day, but I don't think it matters how he tests. I think NFL teams, there's a team out there or multiple teams that are going to watch this guy on film and say, you know what, this guy is just a good football player regardless of testing. I think that is Cam Skattebo. I think he can be a productive. Maybe he doesn't have the ceiling to be an RB, an elite RB1 in fantasy, but at least a high-end RB2 in fantasy that really people kind of are sleeping on now because, again, at the combine, didn't do much. And, some other running backs kind of blew away the combine, which we might get to a little bit later. Now, a running back that I really hadn't really paid much attention to, but I'm starting to come around on now is Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee. He's a smaller running back, and I tend to be a little nervous about these smaller running backs, but we've seen, recently here in the modern NFL, smaller running backs can be productive. James Cook, Jahmyr Gibbs, these guys, not the biggest guys, but NFL teams are starting to scheme these guys' ways, to get him in space, get him out there, and that is exactly, the kind of guy Dylan Sampson is. This guy had 1,500 yards and 22 touchdowns playing in the SEC. In fact, over 1,000 of his yards came against SEC defenses, so it's not like he beat up on cream puff defenses here. This guy is a home run waiting to happen. This is one of those guys, if you do watch him, you will be blown away by the athleticism. Now, of course, there are some knocks here, namely his size. Is that going to turn off some NFL teams? Are they going to view him to be durable enough to be, a true workhorse running back? Although he did handle almost 250 carries last year in college and showed that he could be durable, but this is the NFL we're talking about. And of course, there's also issues like pass protection, getting tackled behind the line of scrimmage, things like that. But if he can land in a spot where he's a complement to a bigger back, again, similar to a Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, or Devon Achane, Raheem Mostert, prior to last year when Raheem Mostert was dust, something like that where he can be a complimentary back, come out there, where the offense can spread out the defense, get him out in space. This guy can absolutely be a weapon, not only, in the NFL, but for fantasy. So Dylan Sampson, somebody I wasn't really on a little bit ago, but now I'm very excited to see where he lands in this year's NFL draft. And if it's a good spot like that, I'm definitely going to be in on him. And the running back that probably saw his stock rise the most after the NFL Combine was Bashal Tutin of the Virginia Tech Hokies. Had an incredible combine, ran a 4.32 40, but also had the highest vertical jump of all running backs, 40.5. This guy is an absolute athletic freak. That will not be a question for him. Also, this is a guy who possesses very good vision behind the line of scrimmage, which I think is a huge plus for running backs. You got to be able to see the hole in order to hit the hole. This guy can do it, and he is an absolute weapon in the screen game. You get this guy out in space on a screen pass, he can rip off huge chunks of yards. He could take it to the house at any time. Again, NFL teams are going to value this, and this is also a huge value in fantasy. Now, again, kind of like Sampson, the downside here, the question marks teams are going to have is this isn't a guy who's like a chain mover type of running back. He can, lose a lot of yardage, have a lot of negative plays, but he's got that home run potential. Again, if he can be a complement to a bigger back, a chain moving type of back, this guy can absolutely be a weapon for fantasy and for an NFL team. And after what he did in the NFL Combine, there's going to be a team that's probably going to take a chance on him earlier than people think. Let's keep going with running backs, and I'm really coming around on Damian Martinez of Miami. The more I watch him, the more I like this guy. And no, he's not a guy who's going to pop off, like ripping off long runs or making spectacular plays, but man, this guy can play football. He has great vision, great agility behind the line of scrimmage. He finds the holes, he finds the openings, and again, he's good yards after contact. He's not a guy that just goes down super easily on first contact. Now, the downside for him here, and especially for fantasy purposes, is not a big pass-catching running back. He's not going to give you that part of the game, so he's probably not going to have the upside to be an elite running back in fantasy, but kind of like Bucky Irving last year, right? A guy that didn't put up great combine numbers, didn't pop off the page when you watched him, but he had the vision, he had that tackle breaking ability, and he was productive for fantasy. I think that could be Damian Martinez too. Again, probably not an RB1 because of the lack of pass catching, but an upside, solid RB2 in fantasy, that kind of potential. And look, there's nothing wrong with those guys. Not everybody can be a top 5 running back, so it's okay to have a guy who gives you solid week in, week out production like a David Montgomery type. And that's what I think Damian Martinez can be out of Miami, so definitely going to be keeping my eye on him as well. Let's give tight ends some love. Yeah, Taylor Warren, Colston Loveland. Yeah, sure, we know about these guys. But what about Mason Taylor out of LSU? He's an athletic tight end, which I think is very important for the position. He's also a great pass catcher. He has great hands. He only dropped one pass all of last season. Not only that, this is a guy who understands where the sticks are. He is a first down machine. 68% of his catches last year went for first down. So that's going to be valuable for NFL teams. You want a guy that moves the chains, right? That doesn't just pick up, catching these little 3-4 yard passes. Understands where the first down marker, gets the amount of distance for the first down. Now, the knock on him here is not a good run blocker, and that is going to limit him as far as his snaps, right? If you're a liability in the run blocking game like we see with Kyle Pitts, you're not going to be out there as much. But when he is out there, my thinking is when he is out there for an NFL team, it's going to be like 3rd and long situations where they need that first down. And look, at tight end, those are valuable catches because if he's catching a pass for 7, 8, 10 yards, that's good right there, right? You can't have our tight ends catching 2-3 yard passes because they don't get the volume for that. So give me the guy that's going to get, a decent amount of yards, going to be out there on those valuable plays, also has a chance to score in the red zone here. So I know everybody likes Warren, everybody likes Loveland, but don't sleep on Taylor. Let's see where this guy lands in the draft this year. And then a running back I've kind of been sneakily drafting at the end of all my best ball drafts has been Trevor Etienne of Georgia. Again, don't let what Travis Etienne did or didn't do last year, affect your view of Trevor here. I'm not going to say he's a better prospect than Travis Etienne, but he's still a very good prospect. Was one of the top running backs in terms of yards after contact and forced missed tackles, which is good for a smaller running back like him. Also led all running backs with a 91% catch rate last year, so that's fantastic for fantasy. That means not only can we get the rushing numbers, but we get those receiving numbers, which is always a good thing for fantasy. And he ran a 4.42 40, so he's got that home run ability. Now, again, the worry here, as with all the smaller running backs, is will NFL teams view him as a 3-down workhorse running back, or will they view him more as like a change of pace type of running back? But again, like I've said, we've seen running backs like James Cook, probably the best example of a running back, undersized running back who is now, pretty close to a workhorse running back in the modern NFL. If Etienne lands in a spot like that where he can be that kind of guy in an offense that isn't going to run the ball 25, 30 times, he can absolutely excel because, again, he's not a guy who's going to need the volume because 1 or 2 plays can make his day here. So Trevor Etienne, again, want to see where he lands. Definitely got the name recognition because of his brother. We'll see how the NFL values him in the draft. And then one more wide receiver, that's Jack Beck out of TCU. This is a guy that can absolutely thrive in the modern NFL here. He's a power slot wide receiver, and he excelled in those horizontal in-breaking routes, which are by far the most valuable for fantasy. That was the same thing with a guy like Ladd McConkey last year. He excelled on those horizontal in-breaking routes. Those are gold for fantasy. Now, the concerns here for him here are his athletic ability, of course, not the most athletic guy, and also the fact that he really didn't do anything in college until last year, his senior year of college. So, you got to worry about a guy who has such a late breakout like that. But look, if he lands in a spot kind of like Ladd McConkey last year, where there's not a lot of competition for targets, he can move into the slot. He can be that big slot wide receiver. He can get those over the middle in breaking routes. He can absolutely excel as well. So again, like a lot of these guys, it's going to matter where they end up, but I'm very excited to see where he ends up on draft day. And then I got to end with a quarterback, Brady Cook. I know Jackson Dart, you probably thought I was going to talk about Jackson Dart or something. And sure, he's fine and he'll probably get drafted ahead of Brady Cook. And Brady Cook may not even get drafted. I don't know. But Brady Cook to me checks all the boxes of a guy who could potentially be an above average QB. But he's also got the boxes unchecked that are he could be a total bust. So first of all, let's talk about the good things here. Has great accuracy, great touch on his throws. He can hit his wide receivers in stride so they can pick up yards after the catch. He also has very good pre-snap reading ability as far as defenses. He knows before the snap a lot of times where he's going to go, where the weak spot is in the defense. And he also ran a 4.62 40, so he's got the wheels. He's got that escapability in the pocket. He understands how to step up in the pocket, how to escape the pocket. He can pick up those rushing yards. Now, what are the downsides here? Well, doesn't have the strongest arm, and his post-snap decision-making and footwork, not the best, right? He definitely can make some bad decisions after the snap if his first read isn't there. Also, footwork needs some work, but if he can land in a spot where the coaching staff can develop him, help him work on the footwork, help him work on the post-snap read, make the offense simple for him, I think this is a guy who could develop into an average to above average starter. Not going to say he's going to be elite or anything, but this is a guy that probably in your dynasty superflex drafts may not even be drafted if you're doing a 3-round draft, but keep an eye on him, especially keep an eye on where he lands. If he lands with a good staff, like a good, like a Kellen Moore type or somebody like that who can develop him, I could see him being, maybe even a contributor here in year 1 for fantasy football. All right, don't forget the NFL draft about a month away. We'll be streaming every round live on here. And don't forget also, free agency just went down. A lot of huge changes in the NFL. If you missed it, we got you covered in this video right here.